Hey everybody, welcome back to Post Status Draft. I've got a great longtime member of Post Status today, and Amber Hinds of Equalize Digital, to talk about accessibility. And you all, Amber, welcome to the podcast. But you all are just coming off a pretty good thing with an award. But we'll get into that in just a second. You want to share who you are, Amber, what you do at Equalize Digital, and then tell me about this award.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Amber Hinds. I'm the CEO at Equalize Digital. We are a B corporation that specializes in WordPress accessibility. And we have a plugin, Equalize Digital Accessibility Checker, which audits WordPress websites for accessibility and provides reports in the admin dashboard. And it's up there on my shelf, like I'm pointing at it. In early November, we were really excited to be awarded a GAAD award from the GAAD Foundation. So that's the nonprofit that's behind Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And they flew me out to San Francisco, and I went to the awards ceremony, and it was us and Unilever and the agency behind the brand new W3C website. So we were in really good company. And so they awarded us that for our accessibility checker plugin and the efforts that we're making to improve accessibility in WordPress. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, it's a great competition, and you all standing out and taking WordPress to all facets of the earth. That's pretty awesome. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I know you all specialize. That's your focus, accessibility, and particularly with the checker with your product. I'm curious about WordPress accessibility. What's on your mind today? And I guess I should say higher up from that is like web accessibility. What are you seeing with the web and in particular with WordPress?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with WordPress and accessibility is always, I think, the focus on accessibility in core and in the editor, and continuing to try and improve and enhance Gutenberg, which, some of the Post Status members, there's been some conversations about that and some of the challenges that the block editor can have and full site editing can have for people, especially screen reader users. So, I mean, a thing that I'm always advocating for is that people join us in the Make Accessibility Slack and contribute on Fridays. Meetings are on Fridays at 10 Central, my time in the US, and chip in, because there's only Joe Dolson is part-time sponsored, and then I think there was one full-time sponsor, but I don't think there is anymore. So they're always looking for more contributors. But I would say, like generally some of the trends that it's good for people to be aware of is that there is a big increase in legal requirements for all websites to be accessible. A couple of years ago, we were talking only about government-funded websites. Now we're talking about all websites, nonprofits, even small businesses. The European Accessibility Act is going to come into play in June of 2025, and it's going to require all businesses to have accessible websites. There are laws in Canada, laws in the United States. The Justice Department has been strengthening the requirements around the Americans with Disabilities Act to say that it really does apply to websites, which that applies to even very small businesses have to pay attention to those laws. So that's something that I think, if people haven't thought about accessibility, they really need to start thinking about it now.
Yeah, those big legislative things or rule change things help push us over, but there's also some preparation for it. I remember GDPR coming around was a big deal, rightfully so. But you had to really change. And I think that's such good news, though, for taking this another big step in making sure everybody can access the web and websites. So, but June 2025.
Yeah, yep, in Europe. I think, the thing that is really interesting about it is that it does take a mind shift and a mindset shift, and it takes a change in our practices. It doesn't happen overnight, but I think, a lot of us were around when we were building websites that weren't mobile responsive. And then in the beginning, we were all like, no, you don't need that. And then maybe we said, okay, yeah, you need that, but I'm going to build you a separate one, or I'm going to charge you a whole bunch extra to do that. And nowadays, I mean, would we launch a website that's not mobile responsive, or would we be like, we're going to double your cost to have a mobile responsive website? No, it's just an expected standard. And I think accessibility is kind of in the same way. Like, it takes some time to get up, and you need to figure out how to fit that into your processes and what you need to change about your starters or the plugins that you use or the way you write code. But I think once you start to learn that and you figure out what tools can help you, then it's just going to become second nature. And then in the long run, accessible websites, they're better for SEO. They're easier for everyone to use, all people, not just people that we think of as, the typical disabilities that we might think of, like a blind person or a deaf person who needs captions. I mean, the number of people who use captions, I mean, I've read captions on videos this week while I was on my phone, right? So I really think, like, once you figure out how to work it in, it's just going to have a better end result for all of us.
And I think there's a message back to those agencies that are working with clients that they can say to clients is, there is now more legislation coming. We need to get on this now, and start talking and having the conversation, because when it happens in Europe, it's like you said, with the DOJ and different things, it's going to cascade here. What are those couple of things? So there's a lot of WordPress agencies in post status. What are the couple of things you might recommend to get ready to really actually add this as a skill set to their web agency that they can do and start working on that?
Yeah. Well, our plugin, of course, I'm going to totally pitch our plugin, but put our plugin on your starter. That's what I would do even before you put it on a finished website. Whatever it is, whether you're using a custom starter or you're using a page builder, we all probably have a blueprint that has things kind of configured the way we like to start from. Nobody starts from zero. Hopefully you don't start from zero on every project. So like, do that, go through the problems and try and figure out if you can improve, so that instead of starting with 10 problems on every page, you're starting with 0, and then, figuring that out. So even our free version of our plugin, it scans posts and pages, like there's no limit. And that is really helpful for learning, because honestly, like a lot of that, and even us, when we started, we learned by doing. And so just getting in and trying to test things with our plugin. Another thing is take your mouse, turn it off, put it in a drawer, and use only a keyboard to navigate your website or the websites that you're building for clients, and figure out, can you search for a product, add the product to the cart, and check out without touching a mouse? If there's a carousel, can you navigate through the carousel? If there's accordions, can you open and close the accordions? Like, all of those things that you think are important for users to do, can you do it with just the tab keys and the enter key, and this button should be able to be triggered by the space bar, right? Like all of those important things. So I think those are probably the two most important, is to just start testing and find problems. Will it be 100% perfect if you do only those two things? No, but will it be significantly better? Oh yes, it will be significantly better.
That's great. So I love the thought of adding the accessibility checker to your starter theme, because right now they could start doing that and just seeing and learning through experiencing, okay, these things came up. I haven't used the checker specifically, or maybe I have, I'm trying to think, but there's a number of, I guess, warnings and things in the plugin that you can probably sniff around and go, okay, this is a common pattern. This thing. I know when we're redoing post status, one of the conversations was our orange color with white text on a button wasn't up to speed. And that was interesting for me to think about, because, I've got fairly good vision. Yeah, the color contrast. But I know I've heard all you say that, but it was something of interest, going, okay, now we have to think through that. I think we ended up on a blue, but When you said the navigate without your mouse, it brought me back to I had a friend of mine. It's been almost 20 years now. Was using JAWS to read things and going. I've not had to do that. I didn't even know when you push a button with the space bar. Like I was thinking, how would you click? So you taught me something today.
Yeah, so buttons are either return key or space bar. And I'm talking not like a link that's styled like a button, like a literal HTML button tag, because we have this weird confusion where we call things buttons, but they're not really. They're actually just links that happen to look like a button. Links are just the return key. So the other thing I would recommend if someone wants to learn, or if you've never heard a screen reader, so I run the WordPress accessibility meetup. It's on Zoom twice a month, first Thursday in the morning US time, and third Monday in the evening US time. So it sort of works no matter where you are in the world. You can pick at least one. And they're all, there's a whole bunch of different topics and that sort of thing. But once a quarter, Alex Stein, who's also a Post Status member, he comes on with me and we do free accessibility audits live for WordPress plugin developers. Which we've had a lot of phenomenal Post Status members volunteer and be brave, because I know it takes a little bit of bravery to let your stuff go up there. But he uses his screen reader and we'll go through. And I think if you've never heard a screen reader, you can either get the recordings for them off of our website or you can tune in live for the next one. And I highly recommend that because it's very enlightening to sort of see how other people experience the web and experience things that to you it might seem obvious or like easy, but if someone's just listening to it or they've never used it before. So
well, I know we've talked about like with accessibility, there's legal requirements and issues that will come up, and that's one compelling reason. But the other is if you just think through when you're saying that navigate a site and see if you can click, you're really talking about usability and experience. And so I'm sure through those processes, working with your clients and the people that your customers with your product, they probably tune up quite a bit their UI, UX experience for their websites.
yeah, so that's the interesting thing about accessibility, like I mentioned before, that it really helps everyone. There's a lot on just like user interface or user experience in general that can be improved when you start looking at, like what is the text of your links? Is it meaningful? Are you just linking the word here? So this is an easy thing. A lot of people, they write paragraphs and they're like, oh, if you want to contact us, click here. And they only link the word here, right? But like having a link that is meaningful. So, contact us and you link that whole phrase. That helps people who are blind and they're only hearing the link without the surrounding context. It also helps people who are sighted because, usually we have style differences. And if you're skimming the page, the links might jump out at you more. And if you were looking for how to contact someone, that link might jump out at you more than the word here would, right? Or we all know that links and their anchor text can impact our SEO, right? So it helps Google know where this link goes to also, instead of just the word here. So there's like a lot of stuff that are just general benefits for everyone.
That's a cool, compelling case right there for, okay, there's looming times coming. But sharing that back to the customer that this doesn't just check a box for the legal requirement. You're into usability, conversion, there's SEO benefits all the way around. So love that. And thank you for those three. I think those are excellent. Use the checker on your starter theme, turn off your mouse, try to navigate the site, and then the WordPress accessibility meetups that happen several times a month to jump in and start preparing for this. Well, so the next question, just to the accessibility checker, is tell me a little bit about the backstory to that. How long has it been out? And then I'll switch gears to ask what you're excited about with it.
Yeah, so the backstory on it is that we had started just doing accessibility work for clients, and we were paying for a SaaS software that would bulk scan websites and help us find problems. And boy, those are really expensive. You're paying per URL. They also weren't, because they aren't CMS specific, the one that we were using, you know, like it would say, there's JavaScript on this page. And I'm just like, great. Okay, that's really helpful. And they're like, I'm sure nothing's broken. And you're just like, this, like, it's not helpful, right? And so we started talking about what's a better solution. And we realized, well, one, we need something that understands WordPress and is written specifically for WordPress. So we have some rules that we're in the process of rolling out that come from the Axe open source rule library, but we also have custom rules that are specific to WordPress. And, you know, we can flag if it's a carousel because we know all the carousel plugins and we're looking for it. So instead of just telling you there's JavaScript, you should go check it. We can be like, go look at your carousel, right? Which is much more meaningful instructions for people. So we started talking about that really in detail early 2020. And then we spent some of our COVID time and our PPP funds building out our MVP of the plugin and released it in January of 2021. So it's almost 3 years old now. And we've been iterating on it. We got an investment from Amelia Capital, which was helpful because we were able to hire a full-time developer to work on it in May. And we have done some things. I could show you if that's of interest.
Show us.
Okay. So I'll show you this on my website, which I just started working on. I haven't, if you look at my website, you can tell I haven't done anything on it for like since 2019, but I've been doing some stuff on my website in the last week. And I went in, so this is a new feature that we added. The free version, it just shows you reports on the post edit screen and it sort of shows you what problems are. And then in our paid versions, we have more full site things. And we just recently added this add-on for audit history where you can actually track performance over time. And this is where I was sitting at, which when I was like, put this on, I'm like, I'm gonna actually do work on my website. And this is totally normal. If you put on a website where you've never thought about accessibility, and I'll tell you, this is built with a page builder. It's built with a theme that I bought off ThemeForest in like 2016 or something, right? Like it's really old. And so I never thought about it. So I have 46,000 issues, but I started going in and looking at some of them, and you can sort of see in a day, I dropped it to 41,000. It's because I needed to change some settings in a plugin to like, so sometimes it can be pretty easy. This was yesterday. I was using an Instagram feed plugin, and it had them opening in a light box, and there were a bunch of problems with the light box. And I was like, I don't actually need that. There's a setting where I can turn that off and they'll just link over to Instagram. So I just like changed that setting, and now look, we've gone down. So this was a new thing that we released, which allows people to sort of track, which is especially nice for agencies if you're doing work for clients, because you could, you know, if I did this for the full month, and then I could be like, look, I took you from this many problems to this many problems, and we can see that the website is getting better. So we released that just last month, and this was our big push before WordCamp US, which was having the full site report, because we didn't have a full site report. So we have this now in the pro version, and you can sort of see how many things you've tracked. And then in the open issues, here's where what's sort of helpful is this breaks it down by what the specific problem is. And I have the ability, if I was like, hey, I just want to go fix like major problems, right? So like an empty button, that means somebody would just hear button, but they wouldn't know what it's for. And there's only 3 of them. I haven't looked at this, so I have no idea what we're about to see. It's sort of fun. But we can see like on these specific pages, I have a submit button that only has, oh, it's probably related to my search. It only has a font awesome icon in it. So a person who is on this page and they're blind and they can't see the icon, they wouldn't actually know this is something they have to submit. Now it's the same thing. So I could probably fix it one place and it would fix them all. But yeah, so that's sort of a high level of what it is and some of the things that we've been working on.
That's excellent. that to me makes it more. I don't do web design, obviously, I haven't for a very long time, but um, makes it accessible, approachable to do this. To go, okay, you know, get hit with a bunch of errors. Okay, start looking through and seeing where you can make some differences, just like you said with turning off the plugin. I think that's excellent. And I can see how if you're running that on sites and just noticing the issues that kind of come up, you're going to learn a lot along the way.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, one thing I would love is for plugin developers, like even if they just used our free plugin, because it's interesting. We use this, and like I mentioned, like that one setting in that plugin, I changed it, but I turned off something in their plugin. But if they were testing, like, then they would see that. And so plugin developers could use this too to test their own stuff. And really, like when I think about the reality of making the web more accessible, WordPress powers almost half the internet. But the vast majority of those sites are not built by a whole bunch of custom code. They're built with plugins and themes, free or commercial, that users have found and used to achieve their goals on their website. And so if we want to make the web more accessible, then it really has to be bottom up. And plugin developers, and this is a big reason why Alex and I do those quarterly plugin reviews. And we're hoping, and why they're public and they're not just private information for that plugin developer, because we're hoping other plugin developers would look at it and be like, oh, I also have buttons that only have font awesome icons and no text or ARIA labels on them. In my plugin, I should go fix those, right? Because if you have 5,000 active installs, 5 million active installs, or anything in between, you fix that in your thing and you make 5,000, 5 million websites better.
Yeah. And when you say plugins, are you referring to their front end output only, or?
So in an ideal world, all plugins should have both accessible front ends and accessible admin screens and admin interfaces, because there are lots of people with disabilities who have WordPress websites or people who rely on assistive technologies who have WordPress websites, and they should be able to use the plugin to build a website too. From an impact standpoint, you'll have a bigger impact by fixing the things that are on the front end first. So that's probably where I would recommend that a plugin developer start, is make sure all of their public facing, their shortcodes, their blocks, whatever it is that their plugin outputs, that is fully accessible. And then go on to your admin screens, your settings screens. If you use the default WordPress UI, it's going to be accessible. Where you get in trouble is if you start building like fancy UIs, or, doing things where you're like using a lot of JavaScript to make a span or a div, a button, not actually using a button tag, right? Like things like that can cause problems.
So I love that we have, a make team at WordPress, that you, Alex, and others are continuing to ring this bell. I've always felt WordPress leads in many ways, not just technology, but in this facet, I think it's the right thing to do. And we're putting our time, effort, like you and others, to make this accessible. But I'm curious. So, when I started with WordPress, it grew to be extremely dominant that it is now. But at the time, we're talking 15, 16 years ago or whatever, there wasn't a lot of competitors to WordPress. And today I look at different segments of just the web, and there's some competition out there with WordPress. But I'm curious what you've seen or how you think the other platforms stack up. I'm biased probably and love WordPress and feel like we probably lead in some of those, but I'm curious where you feel we stand in comparison to some other platforms with this accessibility.
It's hard. I think from some of the conversations that I've had with other people on the accessibility team, I feel like the WordPress core itself is probably only now getting back to the accessibility status of where it was in 2018 before Gutenberg was added in. That really set it back a lot. Most of the issues that were initially identified, they've all been resolved, but of course, new ones have come in. I think there's still some work that needs to be done on process. I talked earlier about at the Gaddies, one of the other winners of the 3 winners this year was the agency who built the new W3C website, which is a major website. And they had a huge accessibility focus with that website, of course, because the W3C is part of who puts together the standards for web content accessibility guidelines. And they evaluated CMSs and they decided not to choose WordPress. They went with Craft CMS because of accessibility concerns. So I think, you know, that is something that the WordPress community as a whole needs to think about, is what is this long-term vision? And, you know, the mission of WordPress is to democratize publishing. If people who require screen readers or who use a sip and puff device or can't use a mouse and have to type cannot create a website and publish content with WordPress, are we democratizing publishing? No. We have to have an accessible core product in order to achieve the mission of WordPress. It's not just about able people. So I think, you know, it's really important that we think about that. I want to say, you know, I had a conversation with that agency and we were talking about it there, you know, like why, and that was a couple of years ago that they were evaluating. I mean, it really was Gutenberg and full site editing. I think, you know, some of the problems that they had identified have been resolved. And so maybe if they were to do that analysis again, they might rethink not choosing WordPress. But I do think that there's some community and some higher level things just within the WordPress community that have to be addressed, like on a mainstream, like where accessibility fits in the process and being willing to make accessibility a blocker. And that to some degree can also be a downside of an open source. So Craft CMS is not open source. It's a paid CMS, but that does mean that there's more control over who builds in it. And Craft was able to be like, yeah, we're going to prioritize accessibility, and whatever problems come up while building W3C, we're going to do those first before we add new features. In WordPress, there isn't currently we're going to fix all of the accessibility before we add any other new features, right? So I think like that's something that has to be figured out.
Well, thank you for that outlook. What about Drupal and I don't know, even Adobe Experience Manager, some of those enterprise type platforms?
So I don't know much about the Adobe platform. Drupal has a pretty strong like accessibility team as well. I think when you look at higher ed, you see a pretty strong balance between either Drupal or WordPress builds in higher ed. So I would say comparatively, it's competitive. Maybe it doesn't have some of the issues in editor that WordPress has with the block editor. I don't hear as much about Joomla. I know like a lot of the proprietary, so like Shopify and Squarespace, it's a lot harder to make websites with those accessible. So I would, you know, if you have a client you really care about accessibility, I would be careful or cautious about going there. I do know like Shopify put some effort into their checkout pages and stuff because they got flack. But, you know, if you're in any sort of content management system where you can't control everything or every aspect, then there could be a possibility that you can't fix it yourself. And at the very least, you're like, you know, at the whims of the developer of that content management system to actually care about your bug report. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I got a little bit off track there asking, but I wanted to ask as we kind of wrap up and everything. One is, what are you excited about with Accessibility Checker that you have going on or that has been done or in the works or getting ready to release?
Yeah, so we are working on, we have a beta right now, but probably by the time this episode comes out, I don't know how long it'll take. It won't be in beta anymore, and it'll be released. We are working on rewriting our rules to be JavaScript based instead of PHP based. We're starting with color contrast because that's where we have had the most false positives, which of course our goal is not to provide people random errors they have to just dismiss, right? We only want to show you real problems. So we're doing color contrast first, and then underline text, which is one of our custom rules. So we have to rewrite that. And then we're going to be working through rewriting all of our PHP rules and doing some refactoring on the admin experience to make it easier for non-technical people to understand what to do when they find problems. So that is what's coming up. And a lot of that has stemmed out of conversations and the work that we did for NASA. So NASA, we announced earlier in the year, they had helped to partially fund us building a front-end highlighting feature for the plugin. And that was specifically for that reason, because NASA has hundreds of content creators, pretty much none of whom have any sort of developer skills. And so we needed to build something that would make it easier for them when they're using our plugin to actually know where the problems are. So that's sort of come from that, and we're continuing to work on that wave just over the next 6 months, especially to really deeply improve user experience within the plugin.
Excellent. We didn't even talk about NASA, but that was a very big launch a couple months ago. Great news for WordPress and for Lone Point Rock and Equalize Digital. I heard your names quite a bit, so congratulations on that too.
Yeah, JJ with Lone Rock Point was great. He led the team on that, and it was very neat to be involved and have a backseat on that whole build.
Yeah, what a flagship site to be able to point to as well. And NASA with their values, obviously, want to embrace open source and accessibility and all the things. So, so one thing I think came out with Accessibility Checker was the audit history too. That's already come out, I think, like as an add-on.
Yeah, so the audit history I showed where it like tracks over time, that is out. We released that the week before Black Friday or Thanksgiving week. And that's included in our small business and agency plans. So we decided that we were just gonna give it to people at those tiers and not sell it separately because we like them. So yep, it's available now.
Excellent. Well, Amber, thanks so much. Anything else we missed out that you want to share?
No, I don't think so. I appreciate that you had me on. You wanted to talk accessibility, and I hope, we maybe inspired somebody at least to go try and use their website without a mouse, or try and test something and see if you can find a problem. I think, it's not an overnight thing. Like I showed my website, right? But I've made progress. Like I don't have a lot of time to work on my personal blog, right? But I looked at it yesterday. I was like, what is one thing I can fix? And it fixed something that's on every page. And I think like, if you think about it that way, like what can you do each day? Like one small thing, then over time, your practice is going to be better. The websites you build are going to be better. And, you probably won't make that mistake ever again. Right.
Yep.
So
absolutely. Well, Amber, thanks so much. It's been very informative and helpful. I've learned some things, and congrats again on the award and also the NASA project and all the cool things you all are doing over at Equalize Digital.
Thank you.